Chapter 1. The Door That Closed. Sophie sat on the small couch waiting for her father to smile at her like before. But his eyes were different that morning. They were cold and his face looked like stone. Her mother asked softly, "Did something happen?" He didn't answer at first. Then, his voice broke the silence. "I can't live this life anymore. I want to be free." Her mother stood still holding a cup of tea. The cup shook in her hand. "Free? From what?" she whispered. "From us," he nodded slowly. "Yes, I've found someone else. I'm tired of this house, this life, this noise." Sophie felt her stomach twist. She wanted to run and hug him, but he didn't even look at her. Her mother stepped closer. "Please don't do this. We can fix things. Think of your daughter." He turned away. "I've already decided. I'll send some money later. Take her and go." For a moment no one moved. The sound of the ticking clock filled the room. Then, he shouted, "I said leave. I don't want you here anymore." Sophie covered her ears. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. She picked up a small bag and placed a few clothes inside. She looked around the room, once the same room, where they had eaten together, laughed together, and now stood like strangers. Sophie whispered, "Mommy, where will we go?" Her mother touched her cheek and said softly, "Anywhere we can. Don't be afraid." Outside, the wind blew hard. Her father stood by the doorway, his face blank. "Close the door when you leave," he said. Sophie held her mother's hand tightly. As they stepped out, rain began to fall. The door shut behind them with a heavy sound, like a final goodbye. They walked down the street with no umbrella. Sophie's shoes were wet and her mother's hair stuck to her face. She turned once to look back. Through the window she saw another woman's coat on the chair. That sight cut deeper than the rain. Sophie said softly, "Will he miss us?" Her mother didn't answer. She only whispered to herself, "Some hearts forget too soon." They reached the corner of the street. Sophie was shivering. Her mother opened her small purse. "Only a few dollars." She smiled sadly. "We'll manage. We always do." She tried to sound brave, but her eyes showed fear. They sat on a bench for a while, both tired and cold. Sophie leaned against her shoulder. "Mommy, are we poor now?" she asked. Her mother kissed her forehead. "We have each other. That means we are still rich." Rainwater ran down their clothes, but neither moved. A car passed, splashing water on their feet. Sophie's mother wiped her daughter's face with the end of her scarf. "Everything will change," she said quietly. "But one day you'll see the pain will also change into strength." Sophie nodded, though she didn't understand. All she knew was that the world she loved had broken in one morning. She didn't know where they would sleep or what they would eat. She only knew one thing. Her mother's hand was still holding hers, and that was enough to keep walking. The street light flickered. The rain softened. They stood and began to walk again. Two shadows moving through the night, leaving behind a house that no longer belonged to them. Like, subscribe, and share. Read this story and many more on our website, bookishenglish.com. Link in the description. Chapter 2. The Night on the Streets. Sophie and her mother walked for hours. That night, their shoes were wet, their hands cold. Every few steps Sophie looked up and asked, "Where are we going, Mom?" Her mother smiled weakly. "Somewhere safe, my love. We'll find a place soon." They reached a small bus stop. The bench was hard, but it was dry. They sat close together. Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder. She could feel her mother's heart beating fast. "Are you scared?" she asked. Her mother whispered, "A little. But I'm with you. That's all I need." A police officer came after some time. "You can't stay here all night," he said. Her mother nodded, trying not to cry. "We'll leave soon." she answered softly. When he walked away, she whispered, "Even the streets don't want us. Tonight." Sophie squeezed her hand and said, "But I want you." Those words made her mother smile. Through her tears, they started walking. Again, the city was quiet. Every window they passed showed a family inside. People eating, laughing, living. Sophie's mother looked at them and said, quietly, "One day we'll have that." Again, Sophie replied, "We already have something. We have us." They reached a small park. A few men were sitting there drinking. Her mother turned quickly and led Sophie away. "Keep walking. Don't look," she said in a firm voice. Sophie could feel her fear. They walked until their legs hurt. At the corner of a street, an old woman was sweeping the sidewalk. She looked at them carefully. "You two look lost," she said. Sophie's mother nodded. "We just need a dry place for the night." The woman thought for a moment, then pointed to a small door. "Behind her. There's a basement under my shop. It's empty. You can stay till morning." Tears came to her mother's eyes. "Thank you. God bless you." The woman smiled. Good hearts always find a way. Inside the basement there was only one small mat and a broken chair, but it was shelter. Sophie lay down beside her mother. Her stomach growled. She tried to laugh. "Listen, my tummy is singing." Her mother smiled sadly. "Tomorrow we'll eat. Promise." They held each other close. Sophie whispered, "Will he ever come back?" Her mother answered after a pause, "Maybe. But even if he does, we'll be different then." Sophie didn't understand the meaning, but she trusted her voice. In the dark, her mother prayed silently. She didn't ask for money or comfort. She only said, "Please keep my child safe." Sophie listened and felt her mother's tears fall on her hair. She didn't move. She wanted her mother to think she was asleep. When morning light came through the small window, they were still holding hands. Her mother looked at her and said softly, "We survived our first night. That means we can survive the next one too." Sophie nodded, smiling faintly. "Then let's go find breakfast." They thanked the old woman and stepped out again. The road ahead was long, but their hearts were stronger now. Sophie looked up at her mother and said, "We'll make it, won't we?" Her mother replied, "Yes. Together we'll build a new life." Chapter 3. The bakery behind the alley. Sophie and her mother walked all morning. Their feet hurt, but they didn't stop. Her mother asked everyone she met if there was work. Most people said no. Some didn't even look at her. Sophie followed quietly, holding her mother's scarf so she wouldn't get lost. By afternoon they found a small bakery down a narrow street. The smell of bread came from the back door. A tired man was cleaning trays. Her mother asked softly, "Do you need help?" The man looked at her for a moment. "Can you wash dishes?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Yes, I can do anything." He pointed to the back. "Start tomorrow. You can sleep in the storage room if you want. Rent is cheap." That night they moved into that small room. It was behind the bakery. Dark and old, but it was their first roof after many nights outside. Sophie smiled. "We have a home again, Mom." Her mother touched her hair gently. "Yes, baby. It's small, but it's ours." The next morning her mother started work. Sophie waited in the corner quietly while her mother washed dishes and wiped tables. The owner shouted, "Often, faster," he said. But her mother never talked back. She only said, "Yes, sir." When she came to Sophie, she smiled as if everything was fine. "How's my girl doing?" she asked. Sophie said softly, "I'm proud of you." Every evening her mother came home with red hands. The hot water had burned her skin. Sophie would put some cream on her hands. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Her mother smiled faintly. "It hurts only when I stop working, so I won't stop." Sometimes they didn't have much to eat. Her mother would bring a small piece of bread from the bakery. They shared it, laughing like it was a feast. One night Sophie asked, "Do you ever get angry at Dad?" Her mother looked at her for a long time. "No," she said slowly. "Anger keeps you in the past. I just want to move forward." Weeks passed. Her mother worked harder each day. The bakery owner started giving her more tasks. Once he dropped a tray on purpose and said, "Pick it up." She bent down silently. Sophie saw this from the corner and felt something heavy inside her chest. When they returned to the room, Sophie hugged her tightly. "You don't deserve this." Her mother smiled and said softly, "I deserve peace, and peace always comes after pain." One day, her mother burned her arm with boiling water. The pain was strong, but she kept working. The owner said, "You can rest tomorrow." She answered, "No, sir. I need the money." That night, Sophie cleaned the wound gently. Tears ran down her face. "Why do good people suffer so much?" she whispered. Her mother said, "'Cause good people never give up. They try to stay happy with little things." On Sundays, they walked together to a nearby park. Sophie picked flowers and made her mother wear them in her hair. "You look beautiful," she said. Her mother laughed. "And you are my sunshine." For a few hours they forgot the pain of the week. One evening when her mother came home, she was quiet. Sophie asked, "What happened?" Her mother sat down slowly. "The owner offered me more money if I stay late at night." Sophie smiled. "That's good, isn't it?" Her mother shook her head. "Not for the reason he asked." Sophie didn't understand at first. Then she saw the tears in her mother's eyes. "I said no," her mother whispered. "He told me not to come back tomorrow." Sophie sat beside her and held her hand. "You did right." Her mother smiled through her tears. "We lost a job, not our respect. Respect will help us find something better." That night they went to sleep hungry, but they slept with peace. Sophie whispered, "Mom, I'm not scared anymore." Her mother smiled in the dark. "That means we are already winning." Before falling asleep, Sophie said one more thing. "One day I'll make enough money. You'll never work again." Her mother kissed her forehead. "I believe you, my brave girl." The next morning, her mother tied her hair, lifted her small bag and said, "Let's go find a new day." Sophie nodded and followed her. The world had been cruel, but they still had each other, and that was their biggest strength. Chapter 4. Hunger, Pride, and Hope. Sophie and her mother left the bakery with nothing but a small bag. The road ahead looked endless, but her mother walked straight. Sophie followed, quietly holding her hand. After a long silence, Sophie said, "Mom, what will we do now?" Her mother replied gently, "We will find work again. Life can break us, but we don't stop walking." Days passed. They knocked on many doors. Some people were kind. Most were not. One man said, "You look tired. Go home and rest." Her mother smiled politely. "I don't have a home, sir." He turned away without another word. Finally, she got a small cleaning job at an office. The pay was little, but it was something. She cleaned floors, tables, and bathrooms from morning till evening. Sophie waited outside with her school bag. Every day she saw her mother's hands growing thinner. Still, her mother said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm fine." But Sophie knew she wasn't. One afternoon while cleaning, her mother suddenly felt dizzy. The world around her spun. She tried to stand but fell to the floor. People shouted. Someone brought water. When Sophie reached the hospital, she saw her mother lying weak and pale. She held her hand and said, "Why didn't you eat?" Her mother smiled faintly. "'Cause I wanted you to eat first." Tears rolled down Sophie's face. "Please, don't say that again." Her mother whispered, "Okay. No more hunger promises. We'll eat together next time." After that day, Sophie became more careful. She saved part of her lunch to bring home. They shared everything equally. They learned to live on little. When there was no food, they laughed and called it a diet. School life wasn't easy. Some children made fun of her clothes. One girl said loudly, "Look at her shoes. They're torn." Sophie smiled but looked down. After class, her teacher called her and gave her a sandwich. "You're a brave girl," she said softly. Sophie nodded but couldn't speak. That night she told her mother. Her mother hugged her and said, "See, there's still kindness left in this world." They started saving coins in a small glass jar. Sophie wrote on it with a marker, "Our home." Every time they dropped a coin, they smiled. Sometimes it was only 10 cents, sometimes $1. Her mother said, "Every dream begins small. One day this jar will buy our peace." Sophie touched the jar each morning before going to school and whispered, "Grow faster." At night, they studied together under a small candle. Electricity was too costly. Sophie read her lessons aloud while her mother listened, pretending to learn too. Once, her mother said, "You know what, Sophie? When you speak English, it sounds like music." Sophie laughed. "Then you'll dance when I become a teacher." Her mother smiled proudly. "Yes, I will." But not all nights were bright. Sometimes her mother cried quietly when Sophie slept. She covered her face with a pillow so the sound wouldn't reach her daughter. She cried for lost years, for broken love, for a life that used to be safe. But in the morning she always smiled again. Sophie never saw weakness, only courage. On Sundays they walked together to the market just to watch people. They didn't buy anything, only talked. Sophie once said, "Mom, why do you still smile after all this?" Her mother replied, "Because sadness doesn't pay rent. Laughter is free." They both laughed then, even though their pockets were empty. Winter came again and the nights got colder. Sophie woke up one night and saw her mother covering her with the blanket, while she herself had nothing. Sophie pulled it back and said, "We share everything, even the blanket." Her mother kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're growing too fast." Weeks later, her mother got another job in a small cafe. It wasn't much, but it gave them bread and tea. Sophie watched her mother from the corner table, moving quickly between customers, always smiling. After so long, she looked alive again. When they returned home that evening, her mother said, "See, the world still has space for us." Sophie replied softly, "Because we never gave up." They sat near the candle counting coins from the jar. They were still far from buying a home, but for the first time it felt possible. Her mother looked at her and said, "You know what I learned, Sophie?" Sophie asked, "What?" Her mother smiled. "We may be poor, but we are not powerless." Sophie hugged her tightly. "Then one day we'll be both strong and happy." Her mother closed her eyes and whispered, "I believe that." That night Sophie couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her mother's words. She realized that happiness was not about money or walls. It was about hearts that don't give up. She promised herself she would grow up and give her mother everything she had lost. Chapter 5. When kindness knocked, the cafe smelled of coffee and hope. Sophie sat near the counter every afternoon, waiting for her mother to finish her shift. Her mother wore a plain apron and a tired smile. She moved quickly between tables, taking orders, serving tea, cleaning spills. Yet every time she passed Sophie, she touched her shoulder and said, "Doing okay, my girl?" Sophie always nodded. "Yes, Mom. You look happy today." For the first time in months, her mother looked alive. The pay was small, but the kindness inside that place was worth more. The owner was gentle and respectful. He often said, "You're the best worker I've got." Each word healed something inside her. One rainy afternoon, a man entered the cafe. He was in his 40s, tall and kind-faced. When he saw Sophie's mother, his eyes widened in surprise. "Maria," he said softly. She turned and stared for a moment. "David." Her voice shook with old memories. He smiled warmly. "It's been 20 years. I almost didn't recognize you." She wiped her hands nervously on her apron. "You haven't changed much." Sophie watched quietly, curious about this stranger who suddenly made her mother's eyes light up. They talked. During her break, David told her he had moved back to town after his divorce. "Life taught me humility," he said. She nodded. "It teaches all of us one way or another." He looked at her hands, rough and red from years of work. "You've been through a lot," she replied softly. "Everyone has a story. Mine just took a harder turn." That evening, as she and Sophie walked home, her mother said, "He was my friend in college. He helped me study when I was your age." Sophie smiled. "He seems nice." Her mother nodded but said nothing more. Still, there was a small glow in her eyes that Sophie hadn't seen in years. Days passed and David began visiting often. Sometimes he came to buy coffee, sometimes only to say hello. Once he brought a small bag of groceries and said, "For Sophie." Her mother tried to refuse. "I can't take this," he answered gently. "It's not charity. It's friendship." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." One evening, the cafe's old light bulb broke. Her mother stood on a chair, trying to fix it but couldn't reach. David walked in just then. "Let me help," he said, replacing it in seconds. "You shouldn't climb things like that." She laughed softly. "I've been doing it 4 years." He smiled. "Maybe it's time someone helped you for a change." Sophie began to like him too. He never tried to act like her father. He only treated her with respect. Once he brought her a second-hand story book. "It helped my daughter learn to dream," he said quietly. Sophie asked, "You have a daughter?" He nodded. "She's grown now, but I still miss reading to her." Her mother saw the sadness in his eyes and felt a quiet connection. Two people, broken in different ways, both trying to stand again. One night after closing, he waited outside the cafe with an umbrella. "It's raining again," he said. "Let me walk you home." She smiled shyly. "You don't have to," he replied. "I know. That's why I want to." They walked in silence most of the way. Sophie held her mother's hand on one side and David's umbrella on the other. It felt strange but warm. When they reached their door, David said, "If you ever need help with anything, just call me." She looked at him and said quietly, "I've forgotten how it feels when someone means that." After he left, Sophie asked, "Do you trust him?" Her mother said, "Not yet, but I believe he's good." Sophie smiled. "Then maybe goodness is coming back." The following week, David came with tools and fixed their broken chair. He repaired the door hinge and left without a word about payment. Sophie's mother watched him leave and whispered, "Maybe kindness still exists in this world." Sophie answered, "It just knocked again." That night, her mother lay awake. She remembered the years of loneliness, the betrayal, the hunger. But tonight felt different. It was not happiness, yet it was peace, the kind that begins when fear starts to fade. She looked at Sophie sleeping beside her and thought, maybe this is what healing looks like. Quiet, gentle, unexpected. For the first time in many years, she closed her eyes with hope instead of worry. Somewhere in her heart, a door that had been locked for too long began to open slowly again. Chapter 6. A second chance at life. The weeks after that night felt different. For the first time in years, peace began to visit their home. David came often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books for Sophie. He never came empty-handed, but he also never stayed too long. He always said, "I don't want to disturb you," and she always answered, You never do. One morning he fixed the small table that had been shaking for months. Sophie watched him quietly. When he finished, she clapped her hands. You're like magic, Uncle David. He smiled. No magic, just old hands that still know how to care. Her mother looked away quickly, hiding the sudden warmth in her eyes. Every time David visited, laughter returned for a little longer. Once he brought a box of muffins. You should taste the chocolate ones, he said. Sophie bit into one and smiled. Best thing I ever ate. Her mother smiled too. Careful, you'll spoil us, he replied gently. That's a risk I'm willing to take. They started sharing small dinners together. He told stories about his younger days, about mistakes and lessons. Her mother listened quietly. You sound like someone who lost too much, she said one evening. He nodded. Maybe that's why I understand you. She looked down at her hands. We're two broken people trying to stay kind. He smiled. Broken doesn't mean useless. Sometimes broken things let light in. Slowly, her mother began to trust him. He never crossed any line, never pushed too far. When she looked worried, he said, You don't owe me anything. Just let me be your friend. One day he fixed the leak in their roof. Another day he took Sophie to buy a small school bag. Her old one had holes, but she never asked for a new one. He noticed anyway. One evening, Sophie said quietly to her mother, He makes you laugh again. Her mother nodded. Yes, but laughter still feels strange. Sophie hugged her, then laughed more until it doesn't. Months passed. Her mother looked stronger, younger, calmer. She had stopped hiding her tears at night. David still came, bringing comfort with his quiet company. Then one evening he came early. Sophie was doing homework. Her mother was washing dishes. He stood by the door and said softly, Maria, I need to say something. She turned surprised. What is it? He took a deep breath. I've loved you for a long time. Not because I pity you. I love you because you're the bravest person I've ever known. You turned pain into grace. She froze, the plate still in her hand. David, she whispered, I don't know if I can love again. He nodded gently. You don't have to answer today. I'll wait as long as it takes. That night she sat on the bed in silence. Sophie came and sat beside her. He told you, she asked softly. Her mother looked surprised. You knew. Sophie smiled faintly. Everyone knows. Except you. Her mother laughed quietly. You're too young for this. Sophie replied. No. I'm old enough to want you happy. For the first time her mother didn't feel guilt when she smiled. The next day she met David after work. You said you'd wait, she said slowly. I'm not asking you to wait anymore. His face softened. Does that mean yes? She nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes. I think my heart has found peace again. They married one Sunday morning. It was small, quiet, and pure. Sophie wore a pink dress. Her mother wore a simple white gown. David stood there nervous, like a young man. When he placed the ring on her finger, she whispered, Thank you for finding me. He replied, You were never lost. There was no music, no crowd. Only 3 hearts that had already suffered enough. Sophie held her mother's bouquet and thought, This is what love should look like. Soft, patient, kind. After the ceremony they returned home together. Their home felt new even though nothing inside had changed. Sophie took their photo and placed it beside the old broken frame that once held her father's picture. Her mother noticed and said softly, You kept it all these years. Sophie nodded. To remember where we came from. Her mother smiled with tears. And now, this one reminds us where we're going. That evening they sat together at dinner. David, her mother, and Sophie, sharing warm soup and laughter. The light inside the house felt gentle, like it was finally safe to shine again. Sophie looked at David and said, Do you Think broken families can still become whole? He smiled. Yes, they can. Sometimes they become stronger because they know the value of peace. Her mother reached for his hand. For a moment everything felt still. The past was behind them, the future finally open. That night as Sophie went to sleep, she heard her mother whisper softly, maybe love doesn't end when life breaks. It just waits for the right time to return. Sophie smiled in the dark. For the first time in her life, the word home meant safety again. Chapter 7. The knock from the past. The years that followed felt gentle. Peace had returned to their small home. Sophie had grown into a young woman. She studied hard, helped her mother, and often laughed with David. Life was not perfect, but it was calm. And that was enough. Every morning David read the newspaper, while Sophie's mother cooked breakfast. He always said, I don't need the news anymore. Everything I care about is already sitting at this table. Sophie smiled. Every time her mother would roll her eyes and laugh softly. You say that every morning, she teased. He replied, and I'll keep saying it until you believe it. One Sunday Sophie was helping her mother fold laundry when they heard a knock at the door. It was soft but strange, like a memory knocking instead of a person. Her mother froze. Sophie looked at her. Who could that be? She asked. Her mother whispered, I don't know. When she opened the door, the world seemed to stop. Standing there was her father, the man who had thrown them out years ago. He looked smaller now. His hair was gray, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes empty. He held his hat in his hands, trembling slightly. Her mother's voice was calm but cold. What are you doing here? He looked at her and spoke slowly. I had nowhere else to go. Sophie stepped forward. She hadn't seen him in years. The anger she once felt was gone, replaced by something quieter. Sadness. You look sick, she said softly. He nodded. Life hasn't been kind to me. The woman I left you for, she left me too. Her mother stood still, no emotion on her face. You made your choices, she said simply. Why are you here now? He looked down. Because I finally see what I lost. You were my home and I destroyed it. There was silence. The sound of regret filled the space more than words ever could. Sophie's mother sighed and said, We don't hate you. We just don't need you anymore. He looked up, tears in his eyes. Please just let me talk to Sophie. Once Sophie hesitated but nodded. They sat at the small table. He looked at her with eyes full of shame. You were little when I left. I thought I was chasing happiness. I didn't know happiness was right here. Sophie listened quietly. Her hands were shaking. Do you know what we went through? She asked. He nodded slowly. I can imagine, but I can never fix it. She looked at him, then at her mother, and said softly, We survived, Dad. We built something beautiful without you. He covered his face with his hands and cried, I'm sorry. I was blind. Her mother placed a cup of water in front of him. Drink. Cry if you must. But don't expect us to undo the past. David came into the room quietly. He saw the man and understood everything. Without a word, he stood beside Sophie's mother, not to protect but to show she was no longer alone. Her father looked at David and whispered, You must be the man who gave them back what I destroyed. David nodded kindly. No, they already had everything they needed. Love and courage. I just stood close enough to see it. Her father's eyes filled again. I don't deserve forgiveness. Sophie's mother replied, It's already given. But that doesn't mean we go back. Sophie felt tears running down her face. You know what hurts most? She said that you didn't even say goodbye when we needed you the most. He looked at her, voice trembling. I didn't know how to face you. She replied softly. Now you did. And it's enough. For a long time no one spoke. Then her mother said quietly, You should go. Now. He stood up slowly. Can I visit sometimes? He asked. Sophie answered. Maybe in another life. He nodded, understanding the final meaning behind those words. He turned toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back one last time. You look happy, he said. Her mother smiled faintly. Yes, because we learned that peace is something you build, not something you find. When the door closed, Sophie leaned against her mother's shoulder. Was that hard for you? She asked. Her mother whispered. No, I made peace with him long ago. Seeing him sad just reminded me how lucky we are now. Sophie smiled. You always forgive too easily. Her mother kissed her head. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for us. It keeps our hearts clean. That night, Sophie sat by the window thinking about her father's tired eyes. She didn't hate him. She didn't even pity him. She just felt grateful that life had led them out of that pain. She whispered to herself, sometimes losing people saves you. David came and sat beside her. You're quiet tonight, he said. I'm just thinking, she replied. He nodded. Your father may have closed one door, but look at all the ones your mother opened. Sophie smiled through her tears. You're right. Maybe every goodbye carries a hidden blessing. Her mother called from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. Sophie stood and looked at both of them. The man who stayed and the woman who never gave up. She thought, this is what family means. Not blood but love that chooses to stay. Chapter 8. The home we built. The days after her father's visit passed quietly. There were no more tears, no anger, no questions left, just peace. Sophie's mother had finally closed that old chapter of her life. She didn't talk about the past anymore. She spent her mornings helping David with his work and her evenings cooking dinner with music playing softly. Sophie had grown into a young woman now. She studied hard and got a scholarship at a nearby college. Every morning before leaving, she touched the old glass jar on the shelf, the one that said, Our Home. It was still half filled with coins, but it was no longer just money. It was memory. It was a symbol of everything they had survived. One evening, Sophie came home. Her mother looked at her curiously. What is it? Sophie smiled and said, It's my first paycheck, Mom. From the part-time job at the library. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. You kept your promise, she whispered. You said you'd make our life better. Sophie held her hand. I didn't do it alone. You carried me until I could stand. Later that night, they all sat together at the dinner table. Sophie, her mother, and David. The small house that once held silence was now full of laughter. David said, You both are my biggest blessings. Her mother laughed softly. You say that every night, he replied. And I'll keep saying it till my last day. Sophie smiled. You sound like Dad when he used to say that about coffee. They all laughed, not because it was funny but because it no longer hurt. Sometimes her mother still thought of her first husband, not with anger but with understanding. She once told Sophie, if he hadn't left, we would never have discovered how strong we are. Sophie nodded. Sometimes losing something shows you what really matters. Years later, Sophie bought a small new house for them. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was theirs. When they moved in, her mother stood in the middle of the living room and said, We made it. Sophie, we really did. Sophie hugged her and whispered, We built this from nothing. With love, not bricks. On the first night in their new home, Sophie took out the old photo frame, the one that had once held her father's picture. The glass was cracked, but she cleaned it carefully. Then she placed inside it a photo of all three of them, her mother, David, and herself. When David saw it, he said quietly, You're keeping history and hope in the same frame. Sophie smiled. Yes, because both belong here. Her mother walked up to her and said, softly, this house isn't just walls. It's proof that even when life throws you out, you can still build something better. Sophie nodded. It's proof that love can grow again, even in broken soil. That night, as they sat together on the porch, her mother leaned against David's shoulder. The air felt calm, but the peace inside them was even stronger. Sophie looked at them and thought, this is what healing looks like. Quiet, gentle, complete. Before going to bed, Sophie opened her old diary. She wrote slowly, greater than, we lost a father, but we found a friend. We lost a house, but we found a home. We lost our past, but we found peace. When she closed the diary, tears rolled down her face, but this time they were warm and sweet. Her mother came into the room, kissed her forehead and said, "Sleep well, my strong girl." Sophie whispered back, "Thank you for never giving up on me." A few weeks later, they decided to frame Sophie's first paycheck beside the glass jar. Her mother said, "It's not about money. It's about the story behind it." Sophie smiled. "Then this house is our happy ending." David raised a toast with his cup of tea. "To second chances," he said. Her mother added, "And to the love that never left." Sophie lifted her cup and said, "To the home we built together." The three of them laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was full of life. Somewhere far away, maybe her father still thought of them. Maybe he Saturday alone, wondering how things turned out. But for Sophie and her mother, that part of the story was already closed. They had built something new, something strong and kind, something that could never be broken again. Like, subscribe, and share. Read this story and many more on our website, bookishenglish.com. Link in the description. The end.